Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Weekly Weeb with me, Miss McEwen. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who listened to last week's episode, which was my Halloween special. I didn't actually intend to start the series with a special, but I'll get onto that later. An extra special shout out to any new subscribers too. It really means a lot to me that you want to hear more of my content, and I'm super chuffed, and I promise I'll try my best to get bigger and better throughout the series. That last episode was recorded with Cara Patton, president of the University of Birmingham's very own Anime and Manga Society and resident horror expert. Yeah, so it was an absolute pleasure to record my very first podcast with you, Cara, and yeah, hit me up because I'd love to do the show again with you sometime. I hope the episode was interesting and insightful for those who perhaps aren't as familiar with horror anime or the horror genre in general. And for those of you out there that are avid horror fans, I hope you found it an enjoyable conversation. For today's episode, however, I'm going to take it back a little bit. I'm going to rewind and actually talk about my first experiences with anime. You can think of this as a kind of introductory episode, i.e. the one that was meant to come out before the Halloween special, but didn't because life got super busy. And I'm really sorry about that. But all excuses aside, let's just get on with the episode. While this episode is actually entitled The First Anime I Ever Watched, to be honest, I'm not actually sure what my first anime was. And that's because when I was growing up, quite a few anime shows were still booming amongst the youth of the West, including stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Digimon. They were all over channels like CBBC and CITV over the weekends. So my typical Saturday morning would involve sitting in front of the telly, bowl of Shreddies, ready to go, bashing out a couple of episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Studio Ghibli films also started being played quite frequently around this time too. So by the time I was 10, I'd seen the likes of My Neighbor Totoro, The Cat Returns, and Spirited Away. But while I was watching and enjoying those shows, I didn't have any idea what they were or why they were so unique, so different from the other cartoons I was used to. It was only then that my sister and I were introduced to a series through a friend that we started to understand the concept of anime. And this is the anime that I would consider my first. The first show I watched having an idea of what anime actually was. So, out of all the classics, all the big names, all the incredible shows we could have started with, what did we start with? Well, we started with Tokyo Mew Mew. The show comprises 52 episodes, so looking back, it was actually a fairly lengthy one to start with. And on top of this, my sister and I watched the whole thing on YouTube at the time. And bear in mind, this is before we knew about any subscription sites and things like that. And each episode was in 2 or 3 parts. So, adding that up, that's about 100 to 150 YouTube videos that we had to watch just to see this one show. Yeah, I'm just grateful that we didn't have YouTube ads back in the day. Anyway, for me, watching Tokyo Mew Mew felt really edgy and exclusive, even though the show has its own westernized version, Mew Mew Power. It obviously wasn't as well known as a show like Pokemon amongst my age group. So I was kind of the coolest British 10-year-old around, because I knew what anime was, and I was loving it. Nah, but anyway, for those who aren't familiar with the show, Tokyo Mew Mew is, generally speaking, a magical girl show. It focuses on its protagonist, Ichigo, who's your average ditzy schoolgirl just trying to live a normal life and get her crush Oyuma-kun to notice her. But, out of the blue, she's suddenly recruited to become a magical cat girl who must save the world from outer space monsters. Along the way, Ichigo has to find 4 other magical girls, and together they fight for the service of the Earth, which is actually a phrase repeated at the beginning of every episode, which got slightly annoying, but it was fun and quirky. So, if it's just your bog standard magical girl show, why am I hyping it up so much? Well, that's because I think, and hear me out, Tokyo Mew Mew is a brilliant anime for beginners. First of all, its superhero theme is quite familiar to a lot of audiences, but that also comes with so many twists and turns and intriguing elements which I just wanted to talk about now. First of all, Tokyo Mew Mew was the first show that introduced me to the whole schoolgirl alter ego trope in anime. This is where the main character seems to lead a normal school life on the surface, but behind closed doors she becomes entangled in the fantastical. For example, I've since seen it in shows like Inuyasha, Fushigi Yugi, and Madoka Magica, to name a few. As a normal and slightly ditzy schoolgirl myself, Ichigo's character felt relatable, but her double life was even more fun and exciting, especially because it involved transforming into a magical catgirl and fighting chimeras. Tokyo Mew Mew weaves the real with the fantastical in a lot of other ways too, though. And one example is the secret base of the Mew Mew project. It appears to outsiders as this cute little cafe where the Mews work at, while it actually acts as the headquarters for them. I thought that was a really cool disguise. And another way in which the surreal is combined with the real is through Ayumakun's character, which was Ichigo's high school crush that I mentioned earlier. Without giving too much away, too many spoilers, his seemingly normal and almost irrelevant character actually becomes really important later in the series. 10-year-old me was really impressed with that scripting, although me and my sis were high-key hoping for the Kishu and Ichigo ship to set sail. The Kishigo ship. Yeah. The second element I adore about the show is its character design. Tokyo Mew Mew managed to fit in what I'd later discover were commonly used personalities, but in a way that made them unique and made the show feel more dynamic. So you had your 5 Mews: Ichigo, the ditzy but strong-willed main character; Minto, the stuck-up yet insecure rich girl; Retasu, the shy and caring one; Pudding, the energetic one; and Zakura, who is your disinterested model girl who was too cool for us all. And then there were the project organizers, who were Keiichiro and Shirogane, the good cop and the bad cop of the series. But also, may I add, they were the fan service for us young girls who were jealous of all the Mews. So jealous. But you've also got the alien baddies, which were Kishu, Taruto, and Pai, who were all curious, mischievous, and annoying in various ways. So all in all, there were a ton of these stock characters that really had their own relevant place in the plotline. And it gave me a flavour of what I could expect in the shows that I would later watch. Shows like Cardcaptor Sakura, Kaicho wa Maid-sama, and The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, for example. Not to mention the Mew Mew outfits, both the cafe ones and after they transform, are just the cutest, and I've always wanted to do a Mew Mew group cosplay. So if anyone is down for that, then hit me up, because it's definitely one on my list. Maybe one day. Another reason why I love Tokyo Mew Mew, and why I think it's such a perfect anime for beginners, is just the sheer amount of stuff it incorporates. Let me explain. So, there's high school life and the trials and tribulations of a young high school girl. There's magic, transformation sequences, chimeras, aliens who look like awesome vampire elves, and an adorable maid cafe. And also cats. Don't forget cats. So, what's not to love about all that? I would even go as far as to say that I consider Tokyo Mew Mew an absolute classic. Yet, although the anime came out in 2002, and me and my sister were watching it in 2008, which is 6 years later, it still seemed so fresh and new to me. And speaking of fresh and new, I wanted to take a quick trip down Tangent Avenue and just talk a little bit more about seasonal anime as a topic. When I was 10, 11, sitting there with my packet of Wotsits watching part 3 of episode 34 of Tokyo Mew Mew on YouTube, taking for granted the lack of ads, I wasn't aware of newer anime shows, and to be honest, I wasn't really in a rush to find out about them. I didn't even discover what seasonal anime was until years later. And even now, I barely manage to watch 1 or 2 shows per season, while others might make it their mission to watch as many as they can. But I'm not judging at all if that's you. In fact, I really admire your patience and openness to all the new shows out there. And it's kind of interesting that after my first taste in anime, I developed that exact same attitude where I wanted to watch as much as I could. Unfortunately, though, in that process, I watched so many unmemorable and terrible shows, including a random baseball show that didn't entertain me in the slightest, and quite a lot of harem animes that were just a bit silly, to be honest. But after I got out of that phase, I really made an effort to seek out shows that made me feel something. Shows that might make my stomach hurt from laughing, like School Rumble or Space Dandy. Shows that both disturbed and intrigued me, like Elfen Lied, Chobits, Paranoia Agent. Shows that made my heart break, like Steins Gate. And this is where I feel the problem lies in our modern age of anime, and in fact, all kinds of visual and audible media. There's such an overwhelming number of platforms for accessing entertainment. You've got Crunchyroll, Funimation, Netflix, Now TV, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, and those are just naming the big ones. There's just such an overwhelming amount of choice, and so many of us are guilty of just ploughing through a selection of random shows just because we can. And the fact that these new seasons seem to roll over so quickly creates this inescapable kind of bubble of hype around the popular shows of each season, which is something that I actually found quite pressurizing when I was president of UOB's Anime and Manga Society myself. For example, if I hadn't seen one of the popular shows of the current season, some people would actually seem shocked and ask me things like, well, how has the president of the society not seen Violet Evergarden? Which actually got to me a little bit, to be honest, because, I don't know, I've always liked to keep myself busy. I'm a busy person, I like to do things, and although I love anime so much, I never had that significant a portion of my life to dedicate to watching shows that I wouldn't, in the end, take that much from. Seasonal anime has always been too much for me to keep up with. Like, I'm a slow reader, and I'm a slow watcher as well, so to fully appreciate a show, I need time. 12 episodes might only take 6 hours to binge, but a series of that length that really resonates with me will take me a few weeks of thinking over. I just remember after watching shows like Death Parade, for weeks after that, I was just sitting there thinking, whoa, that blew my mind. And I want to get that feeling as many times as I can, and those are the kind of shows that I want to seek out. So, yeah, I personally don't have the time to invest in a multitude of shows, which may end up being kind of meh. But if you do have the time to watch loads of shows and that's your thing, then that's totally cool. That's great. I'm not judging you for that at all. I think I admire your patience and your enthusiasm for anime, and I don't know, maybe if I had more time I would spend a lot more of it dedicating to watching as many shows as I could. But just be aware that what I felt subjected to by some of my friends was a kind of competitive otakuism, where I felt pretty left out of the picture if I hadn't jumped on certain hype trains. So if you're just getting into anime, one piece of advice from me would be to try and not let the seasonal wave sweep you away if you don't want it to. You don't have to persevere with the show simply because of the hype. And in my opinion, you're missing out on more if you don't watch the shows that you genuinely want to make a connection with. And on that note, I bring this episode to a close. Thank you for listening to my shorter spiel about Tokyo Mew Mew. Again, I can wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who's just starting out with anime. And one other thing I didn't mention is how damn catchy the opening and ending themes are. So yeah, at least try and check those out if you're not as interested in the show itself. I'm sure there'll be more ranting about the nature of anime in our Netflix era, but a lot of it's been said before by the likes of Giguk, Glass Reflection, and a load of other anime YouTubers out there. At the end of the day, there's definitely pros and cons to the way that we approach anime these days, but the important thing is that you're able to appreciate the things you watch, even if just a little. Thanks for listening to the Weekly Weeb once again, and I'll be back with more anime chit-chat next week. Bye bye!